Every year, millions of Americans are exposed to a contagious virus.
It's not a disease.
But it's toxic.
It's not genetic.
But we're all at risk.
You can contract it from a stranger or a friend.
You can catch it at the movies.
Or by listening to a song.
And if you spent even a minute on the internet,
You've definitely been exposed.
What is this virus? It's stigma.
Stigma.
It's stigma.
Stigma may not directly affect you.
But it harms the 1 in 5 Americans living with mental health conditions.
Stigma promotes an environment of shame,
Fear and silence.
Which prevents millions of people from seeking help.
Stigma isn't just harmful. You also risk coming across as a real jerk.
but there's good news.
The National Alliance on Mental Illness believes stigma towards mental illness is 100% curable.
And it's pretty easy to find out if you have it.
So do yourself and everyone a favor.
Go to curestigma.org and get tested for stigma.
Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter, still broadcasting from home as we all continue to shelter, safe distance, and wait. Today we bring you another Silver Linings episode in the hope that we may continue to help sustain and inspire you throughout the COVID-19 shutdown. And to remind you, paraphrasing Winston Churchill, that this isn't the end. This may not be the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
Dominique was born New Year's Day, 1987. And I remember the first time I saw him, the first time I held him, I couldn't believe that God blessed me with this gift. And I remember making a promise to Dominique, myself, and God that I will protect this child from all harm and give him the best life possible. Dominique had a great life until he was about 20 years old and he was diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia. And our world changed. And as a father, it is incredibly difficult to not know how to help your child. And that was a traumatic time for me. It was his sophomore year of college, Thanksgiving break. And initially, quite frankly, our fear was that he had gotten hold of some bad drugs. And after examining him, they came out and told us there were no drugs or alcohol in his system, but that they were putting him on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. And for us, it was like going 100 miles an hour into a brick wall because we had seen none of this, no evidence, no suspicion, nothing. And it changed our world. With mental illness, because we don't talk enough about it in our society, we were totally blindsided and we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what his treatment path was going to look like. We didn't know what his life was going to look like going forward. Because of the stigma of mental illness, he didn't want any of his friends to know that he was receiving treatment, so he stopped taking his medication, and that led him to start self-medicating with marijuana and alcohol. The last letter that I wrote was 10 days before we lost him. And I wrote to the doctor and said, please, can we hospitalize him just for 30 days, just to get him stabilized, and I will take it from there. On the morning of June 28th, I wrote a last letter that just had 2 sentences, and it said, dear doctor, please disregard my last letter. Dominique killed himself yesterday. I asked him if he had any suicidal thoughts, and his response was, yes, I have suicidal thoughts, but I would never hurt myself. And when I asked why, he said, because I know that no matter how much trouble I'm in, no matter where I am in the world, my dad will come for me because you show up even when I don't want you to. And I believe that. I believe that my love for him and our bond was more powerful than the illness, but it wasn't. And every day now, I have to wonder when he stepped off that chair, with that strap around his neck, was there one moment that he wanted to turn back and say, "Dad, I need you now." And I wasn't there. You feel so much. You feel disbelief, you feel grief, you feel guilt, you feel scared. As a father, I felt emotions that I couldn't handle. It was absolutely overwhelming. I was angry with myself that I didn't prevent this. And at the same time, you're trying to be strong for everybody else. I felt like I let everybody down. I felt like I certainly let Dominique down. I felt like I let his mom and his brother down. I felt like I failed God. And in addition to that, there were other people who would suggest that it was my fault or there was something more that I could have done to prevent it. And so it's a lot to carry at one time. I had gotten to a point that I just couldn't handle the pain anymore. And I had a plan. I went to visit his grave site, which I normally do alone. And I, for lack of a better term, got my affairs in order. And I went to visit him with no intention of coming home that day. So I had to make the decision whether to live and heal or to die. And I knew I had to be strong. Since I couldn't take my own life, then I had to find a reason to live. I came up with a new plan. And so I decided that I needed to help others and find something meaningful to do. And ultimately that led me to NAMI. Of course, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I joined as a volunteer shortly after losing Dominique, and didn't realize that it would provide me the opportunity that I was looking for to not only help other people, but to help myself. And I wanted to make people more aware of the support, education, and advocacy that's available to them, because no parent should go through this alone. No sibling should go through this alone. And it's incredibly important that they know that there's help available. As difficult as it is to tell Dominique's story, I always see a benefit. And there's always a parent, a sibling, or even someone who's contemplating suicide themselves who have come to me and said, because you were willing to tell your story, I've changed my course of action, and I'm either not going to attempt suicide or I've decided to get involved and help somebody else. I would say that if anyone is out there who is considering suicide, I implore you to get help. I implore you to reach out to someone you trust and let them know that you're struggling, because there is help available. There are people who love you, and there are people who will take you to help.
Growing up, I was the only child of two addicts. And, I lived in poverty, with my mother half the time. We didn't have any food to eat. And it was just chaos. It was pure chaos all the time. My mom was a severe binge drinker, and at nighttime she would just explode. And I just prayed. I prayed and prayed and prayed for her that she would be okay, that we wouldn't get kicked out of where we were. When I'd ask her about what happened the night before and if she was okay, she'd be like, "Bethany, you're making up lies," and to just be quiet. So I had to hold a lot of secrets for a really long time. It hurt me because I started questioning my own self. I actually started getting panic attacks in 2nd grade. And so I was a 7-year-old and I was feeling like I had no air left. I was hyperventilating. I felt like I was gonna die. So for many, many years, I was misdiagnosed as having asthma, but really I was having full-blown panic attacks since I was 7. I would just start shaking uncontrollably and sobbing for No reason, no trigger. No one knew what I was going through. They said, you know, you have like major depression, an anxiety disorder, insomnia. And so they put me on all these medications, and I started to feel a little bit better, but at the same time, I was still experiencing other symptoms. I was at band camp, and I started hearing voices for the first time. And I had no idea what was going on. My mom stopped taking me to the doctors because she didn't believe in it, and she was mad at them and said that they were making me worse. So I went back to school. I tried to act like everything was normal and I was okay, but I still got really suicidal. Like, I started writing my suicide letters to people. At the same point that I attempted suicide, I had my first psychotic break. I started visually hallucinating religious things and figures. Things just got worse and worse. I kept having suicidal ideations throughout high school. I had a lot of, you know, just weird mental health stuff, you know, hearing voices, not knowing if they're real or not knowing if people are really spying on me or not. And I had told like some of my friends, I'm like, you know, guys, like, does this happen to you? Like, what's going on? And they're like, Bethany, no, don't say that. Like, you need to stop talking about it because no one's gonna wanna be your friend. I was a 3.0, 3.5 student, and my grades went down to a 1.7 because all I did was sleep in school. The medication made me so drowsy and zombie-like. I started not hanging out with friends as much, and I just started backing away and isolating myself. And I wasn't, you know, showering, brushing my hair. I stopped doing all that stuff and just became this zombie. Well, I got re-diagnosed when I was 19 as having bipolar disorder. And I thought that was the correct diagnosis, but it wasn't. I went to a new mental health clinic to get a second opinion, and my doctor took one look at me, looked at my records, and he was like, you have schizoaffective disorder. You have a form of schizophrenia. And I'm like, everything just made sense in that moment. For the first time in my life, I felt like, you know, people had said so many negative things to me. Oh, you're crazy, you're a lunatic, you're gonna amount to nothing, you're a wacko, all these things, to someone giving me a proper diagnosis for what I was living with. Yes, I have this illness. This is how it affects me. I'm not gonna let it take me down, and I'm just gonna do everything in my power to learn about it, to research it, and to exceed. I was just trying new medications, and some of them didn't really go with me that well, and I became extremely suicidal. And while I was having paranoia and hearing voices, and so I ended up hospitalized twice in a row, and they finally found the right medication combination the second time I was in the hospital. So they changed all my medications. And I was like, thank goodness, because I had been on over 35 different medications. I feel like I'm a survivor. Like, I chose life and I chose opportunity, because no matter what a doctor has told me or said to me, you know, that could have like pushed me down, I just kept trying. I was like the little engine that could. I never gave up, and I kept pushing forward until I found that right combination. I had support from my found family, as I call it. I formulated a group of friends who I live with, who care about me, who know what to do when I'm in crisis, and who are the most amazing individuals I have ever met. And I truly believe that, you know, they're gifts from God. You know, what do you do when someone is just like, I have no hope left? And you have to tell them, you know, you feel like this right now, but I swear to you, if you keep trying, something is going to budge. Something will budge, and you know, one day you're not gonna feel like this. You know, pain ends. And I didn't know that for many years. I didn't know that the pain goes away.
Welcome to My Healthy Mind,
a show that dares to talk about mental health matters that touch nearly every family. Each week, you'll meet guests who share their stories, hear from local experts, and learn about resources that may help.
And so I was in a committee meeting at the House of Representatives when I realized that my daughter had autism.
We need to take the stigma away from mental health issues.
No topics about mental health and wellness are off limits on our show.
Let's talk about it on My Healthy Mind.
At Team Wellness Primary Care Center, you will find all the basic services you need to be well and stay well. Come in for all your screenings. Come in for routine physicals and checkups. Come in for full-service dentistry. Come in for vaccinations and immunizations. At Team Wellness Primary Care Center, we take care of your total health. Team Wellness Primary Care Center. Come on in.
Yeah, I think I was a pretty happy kid. Like some of my teachers noticed that not so much that I didn't get along well with other kids. It wasn't like that. It was just sort of more like I was avoiding playing with the other kids. I knew how to read before I knew how to hold a conversation with another person. But I did know that there was something about me that separated me from my classmates. Yeah, it was one of those things that I just couldn't put my finger on.
As a baby, he was my firstborn. His sleep patterns were terrible. I got so little sleep after 18 months. I started to see, like, I'd swat at bugs that weren't there.
Oh
because
my goodness.
It would be like an hour and a half of screaming and an hour and a half of sleep, and for really prolonged periods. So I noticed those peculiarities, but it didn't really come together to make a syndrome yet, because his developmental milestones were pretty much on target. So pediatricians were like, he's fine, he'll be okay. He's just got a funny temperament. He had a real hodgepodge of like a speech and language disorder, an ADHD, and I can't even remember what else at the time. When it did come out, and I first got the manual, the diagnostic manual, and read the definition, it was like, oh my gosh, he fit it so perfectly. He was 8 or 9. It was great. It was a great moment to see one unifying diagnosis that covered all these quirks, because it was understood that now this is something on the autism spectrum. So it started to make sense, and it wasn't chalked up to being spoiled or willful.
It helped to know that the ways that I was different, it was good to know that it had a name. When I'm interacting with another person, it's kind of like you ever tried watching a bunch of TVs at once, and they're all tuned to different channels, and I think that's kind of similar to my experiences with interacting with others. Like I not only do I have to pay attention to the words they're saying, but also their tone of voice, where their eyes are looking, their facial expressions, their posture, the position of their arms and legs. With people, it's like trying to watch multiple channels. There's actually multiple Asperger syndrome support groups there on Facebook that it allows people to communicate with one another, as I'm sure we all know.
One thing that's played on my mind as I've watched Sean grow up, and my friends' children who have Asperger's as well grow up, is don't be afraid to set limits with your child. You apply the rules differently and with understanding and with additional time built in to help them pick up on these things, but we want to set our children up to function in society when we're long gone. And so to do that, it's really important that we just keep on setting those limits and teaching those lessons, even if it takes many, many more repetitions and many different ways of getting the message across, that it's just very important and I think crucial to a good outcome. I think we've had a positive outcome.
I was that typical outgoing, very social 21-year-old guy, just living my life pretty hard, like most of us did. And about 23, I went to the Secretary of State to renew my driver's license, and the lady said, would you read the letters, as you know? And she said, no, I need you to start from the left. And I did it again, and she said, no, I need you to start from the left. And I did it again, and she said, you're not doing this. And I said, well, I am. And I moved my head around a little bit and used more of my right eye, and found that I was actually missing about 5 or 6 letters on the left side. And to the point where I probably irritated this person, because I just wanted to be able to read these. It was very confusing, like, well, what's going on here? Because to that point, I had no idea that I had any visual difficulties to speak of. I mean, like nothing. And so over the course of the next few months, I saw specialists and doctors and testing and so on. And I was ultimately given a diagnosis of Stargardt's disease. It's a juvenile form of macular degeneration. Well, I was 23 when diagnosed, and like most people at that age, most guys are just young people at 23, I thought I was bulletproof, and I chose to just forget about it and do nothing. I just finished my coming out of college with my paramedic license, and which was a lifelong dream of mine. I always wanted to do that job, and I finally achieved it. And I did. I stepped off into that career, and I was able to do it for, probably 23 years or so, before my vision got to the point where it was no longer safe. By the 1990s, I had become legally blind, and I knew at that point I had to take an early retirement. It was a very heartbreaking time for me. I was in total denial of my blindness, and I refused to accept it, and I also decided I wasn't going to be one of those people that that have that stereotypical view of sitting on a corner begging for nickels with your white cane and your tin cup. There's things that most people don't think about. Simple things like personal hygiene, clipping my nails, shaving, did I get everything off right? Am I crooked? Combing my hair, does it look right? Dress, is my shirt on inside out? That's probably happened over the years, but so things along that line. I realized that I needed to do something. I was stepping off in front of cars and being yelled at by people, what are you, blind or something? And I'm thinking in my head, well, yeah, I sort of am. A lot of anger, frustration, I'm sure some depression at points. How I coped with it, I didn't. I just pretended it wasn't real. And really what happened to me is I began to lose the person that I was, and went to a very dark place. I got to the point after 10 or more years that I realized I gotta try something, and I went online and I ordered my own white cane, and to step out that front door that first time and start walking down the street with this cane in front of me was a horrible experience, to be honest with you. It was very awkward, but as I did it more, I became more comfortable with it. And eventually there was a knock at my door, and inbound this 16-month-old yellow lab pup. And I mean, if you think you don't have tears coming down your eyes at that point, my goodness, it was one of the most powerful emotional moments of my life. I got my dog, yes, I did. I got Gracie, and from that moment on, I began to get my life back and find the guy that I lost. We are joined at the hip, and we are the perfect working team. It gave me my independence, my mobility back, and quickly comes this self-confidence and self-esteem, and all that stuff came back. There's no darkness in my life anymore. I was in Delaware in April and speaking at an elementary school. And now you picture there's 650 kids sitting Indian style out there on the floor. And if you think that things don't work, aren't for a reason, out of 650 kids, this guy picked this one young man who was sitting very near the front. And I could see that his head was down at the floor, and very meekly said into this microphone, how does a dog work, you know? And I said, well, you sort of saw how the dog works, and you know, I explained a couple of things, and then he said, because I don't see well. I said, you don't see well? He said, no, I don't see well. I said, well, what can you see? And he looked to his left, and there was across the row, and he says, well, I can see there's somebody sitting there, but it's all fuzzy and I can't see it. And I says, my gosh. And so the event got over, and the little guy stood up, and we made sure that he got up to me, and I got him. I stood there, and I think he was a fourth grader, so he's just a short guy, and I got the harness in his hand, and I said, now I said, tell Gracie to find the door. And so very meekly he said, Gracie, find the door. And Gracie took off and walked him to the door. And the whole time, it's going to make me cry, I'm telling you. The whole time over there, he just kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we got to the door, and he turned and looked at me, and I just kind of got down and put my arm around him. I said, look, you know, understand that look at me, you know, I'm out traveling again, and I'm doing what I'm doing, and there's so much stuff out there for you. Don't get discouraged. There's, you know, the same thing, the organizations and your school counselors, and you can work through this. And he's just like, yeah. I said, okay, you got it? He says, yes, I do. And he turned and he walked about 3 feet away, and this little guy turned around and ran up and gave me the biggest bear hug in the world. And I swear to God, it was just, I mean, teary-eyed and everything at that moment.
Thank you for watching. You'll find the complete catalog of My Healthy Mind episodes on our website at myhealthymind.com. And we, of course, will continue to bring you messages of perseverance and hope for as long as it takes to get us through this crisis and back to normal. Meanwhile, be well and stay safe. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content from My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it.